2010 had finally arrived as the start of a new decade of the WRC, but since the turn of the century hadn't really changed in any significant way. The actual podiums created as an end result of these championships was also at a bit of a standstill. Citroen had won the manufacturer's title for the past 3 years, and Loeb had won the driver's title for the past 6. It was clear that if anyone else was going to attempt to take either title, a little bit of a shake-up would be required. Not beating around the bush, 2010 was another year in this anthology. Citroen was on consecutive manufacturer win number 4, and Loeb was on consecutive driver win number 7. And yeah, 2011 continued this with identical standings. It is also important to note the significant changes that were implemented at the start of this season, the biggest the sport had seen since the introduction of the World Rally Car back in 1997. Most notably, the cars were to be based mostly on the previous Super 2000 class of racers, though unlike those cars which were fitted with naturally aspirated 2-litre engines, these new versions were to be fitted with 1.6-litre turbo engines. Plus, cars could be fitted with kits such as rear wings, though these items must be removable within a predetermined time limit. The final major change was the introduction of something called a power stage. Basically, the top 3 finishers at the final stage of any given rally would be given bonus points, no matter where they placed in the stage as a whole. First would get 3 bonus points, second would get 2, and third would get 1. This idea was actually trialled twice in the 1999 season at Rally Finland and the Tour de Corsa. Still, these changes were no skin off the teeth of Citroen and Loeb, adding yet another point to their tally of consecutive wins this year. At this point, it really does seem a little outrageous that just one team and one driver were able to dominate so, well, effortlessly. I mean, 7 consecutive wins, there surely has to be some sort of bribery going on. On the contrary, however, there was plenty of competition. Instead, it was really just that Citroen had perfected the rally car at the time. It really was a truly incredible machine of power and agility. And as for Loeb, well, a genuinely incredible individual with not only buckets of natural talent, but also a truly inspirational level of drive, pun intended. Something was going to be needed to come in and shake up the championship once more, and some new faces might help do that. One of these quote-unquote new faces was the return of a very old face, Mini. The reason I say new is because Mini hadn't actually competed in rally since the 1960s and had never competed in the WRC until this point. They had obviously been one of the most iconic racing teams in history, undeniably being the icon for rally sport in the 1960s and the pre-WRC era, but after decades of hiding in the shadows, they were ready to return. Not to mention the fact that the Mini of today and the Mini that revolutionised the roads of 1960s Britain were, to put it bluntly, vastly different. The Mini John Cooper Works WRC was their baby of choice this time, though not based on the Cooper like many would expect. Instead, it was built upon the design of the much more rugged Countryman, fitted with a 1.6 number courtesy of BMW. It was entered into a limited event in the 2011 WRC, but would not be raced fully until the 2012 season, under the ProDrive team who had previously worked with the Subaru Impreza. However, as one manufacturer entered the fray, another one left. It was announced at the end of the 2012 season that the Ford World Rally Team would be ending its participation in the WRC as Ford was cutting its sponsorship. Obviously, multiple teams had left the championship before, but this really was a huge moment for the sport, as this Ford team had been competing continuously since 1978, in that time winning 3 titles to their name. M Sport had also been competing with Fords, but after the official factory arm of Ford departed in 2012, M Sport became the official name under which Fords would continue to race after they found other sponsorships to secure funding. At this point too, Citroen was also shaking up their presence. The C4 had won them 3 World Rally Championships, and now its replacement was here to continue this legacy. The Citroen DS3 WRC, obviously based on the Citroen DS3. The DS3 was quite different for the manufacturer, being the first car launched under the DS brand of Citroen, and from 2016 onwards it wouldn't even be marketed as a Citroen. Mechanically it was pretty sound, downgrading to a 1.6 litre turbocharged inline 4 making 300 horsepower. To be honest, introducing so many of these cars back to back can appear fairly monotonous. However, there is actually a reason for this. As some people have pointed out in previous episodes and from general observations, the WRC saw a shift throughout the 2000s from the popularity of sedan-based races to hatchback-based. By the time the 2010s rolled around, the entire championship was contested by only hatchbacks. There is a multitude of possible reasons for this, such as hatchbacks being lighter, easier to work on, easier to develop, and simply the fact that sales dictate that hatchbacks have overtaken the sedan in terms of popularity. Of course, there have been successful similarly sized and scaled cars throughout the history of the sport, such as the Peugeot 205 and the Lancia Delta, but they were comparatively few and far between. This means that most cars in the WRC share a very similar silhouette, a far cry from the likes of the Group B era, where every car was instantly recognisable and distinguishable from one another. This would be a continued story for the next big entrant into the sport, Volkswagen. Like Mini, Volkswagen had competed in rally before, but to a much lesser extent. They predominantly performed throughout the 1980s with their Golf GTIs. However, with not much success or luck, they formally withdrew from the sport in 1990. However, in 2013 this aspect of their history was revived and they appeared once again. This time they presented the VW Polo R WRC. Unlike most cars entered throughout history, the Polo didn't have the early stepping stones and settling in to do, being that the team managed to take their first ever constructors title in the same season that the car debuted, with quite a sizable margin over Citroen too. The driver's title would once again be taken by Sebastian, but not Loeb. Sébastien Ogier was another Frenchman and one that managed to usurp Loeb from his throne. Ogier had started his rallying career in the mid-2000s racing small rallies for Peugeot. He moved over to the WRC in 2008 and was actually the first ever junior WRC driver to score a point in the WRC, as he not only placed first in the Juniors Championship but 8th overall too, scoring him a single point. After a brief stint with Citroen, he would move to Volkswagen to spearhead their new Polo WRC project, and it seems that that was a good choice. However, Ogier's victory did mean that Loeb's consecutive run had finally come to an end, with an astounding 9-year domination of the sport between 2004 and 2012. It's also worth noting in 2013 that both the WRC2 and WRC3 categories were introduced. This was a reorganisation of the Group R classes, they themselves introduced in 2008. While there is a lot to unpack, the WRC2 basically homologated 4-wheel drive cars from the previous R5 class, such as the Skoda Fabia R5, while the WRC3 homologated 2-wheel drive cars from the R1, R2 and R3 classes, such as the Renault Twingo RS R1. There is a lot to this aspect of the sport, so let me know if you want me to cover it in a separate video to keep this one from running too long. But back on track, the 2014 season was largely a similar event to the previous year. Volkswagen took their second title with a point total over double that of Citroen in second, and Ogier would easily take his second driver's title. Interestingly, another fairly large name in the sport would return this year after 11 years hiatus, this time being Hyundai, who had last competed in 2003 with the Accent WRC. This time they debuted a new, smaller motor to better fit in with the modern landscape, that being the i20 WRC. With not much success in the early years, it would soon come into its own, as we shall soon see. Many people overlook this period of the sport as it may not seem as interesting or iconic as past championships. However, with the second generation of World Rally Car rules being implemented and a number of new and old faces mixing up the battle for the title, the stage was yet again changing dramatically. Plus, with whispers of such ludicrous things as hybrids and all electrics entering in the coming years, no one really knew what was to follow.